Hey, it's Matt, your average gamer, and for this one, we're going to be covering 5 of the most fun builds that I've done so far in patch 1.09. This is more or less a summary video, but it's going to catch up everybody and also show off some really cool builds. Let's get into the details here. First up, we're going to start off with Death's Poker, a really powerful build. So this past week, I had this idea to buff up Death's Poker as much as I possibly can and see what amount of damage that I was able to get out of it, and the damage was substantial. I was able, with the Ash of War, and it is technically 2 inputs, I was able to get over 20,000 damage several different times. It was really impressive and really powerful. Death's Poker is one of the best things to buff in Elden Ring. It's fantastic because you can use Terra Magica on top of all the normal buffs. It's a very powerful weapon. Looking for a sidearm as a mage that scales primarily with your intelligence stat in the Ash of War and something that you could buff up for extreme damage, look no further. Death's Poker is a fantastic option for you. Let's get into equipment for this build. Equipment, we have Death's Poker plus 10. We had a Seppuku sword to bring our HP down. Any seal will do. Any staff will do. We had the Jellyfish shield. We had the Black Dumpling. And the Spellblade set will boost this Ash of War, by the way, because it's magic damage. Shard of Alexander. We had Kindred of Rot's Exaltation. We had Red Feathered Branch Sword, Magic Scorpion Charm, and then we had the Magic tier. You throw in something like the Faith tier for buffs. For the defense tier is a fantastic option too. Let's get into stats. I did this one on a level 200 character. By the way, all these builds are between level 150 and 200. I polled the channel recently, and a lot of you guys are actually playing over 200 to my surprise, but I'll still stick in the 150 to 200 range for the most part. I like to do a lot of builds around the 150 area, but anyway, for this, just go as high intelligence as you possibly can, minimum stats on the weapon, and a little bit of faith because you're going to want to be able to do Golden Vow and Hellish Fury to boost that weapon art that does fantastic damage. Next up is the overpowered Dex Faith hybrid build that I did. It's a really fun one. This is a Dex and Faith hybrid build at 150. This is a little bit interesting, but basically, long story short, we're taking advantage of the fact that 1.09 boosts the damage in the claws, and then we're using Electrify Armament to give us additional lightning damage on top of that while throwing in different incantations. This is a really powerful build to mix stuff too, because you can build up successive attacks, which are generally speaking generic damage, and as you build up that generic damage, you can throw in different incantations to do substantial damage as well, and it all adds up to a lot. With Claws having the recent boost on patch 1.09, this is a fantastic build to shred the majority of bosses in Elden Ring. This was one that I definitely couldn't put down simply for the fact that it was different. It was something interesting where we just did Dex and Faith and we mixed everything up, and I was able to do some of the most fun incantations in the game while also taking advantage of the good AR on the Claws, with Electrify Armament giving us a substantial amount of damage. I'm going to show it off here again how much damage you can get out of this build. Even with a hybrid build, it's a little bit overpowered. This is no doubt definitely one you're going to want to try. This is on New Game Plus 7, by the way, and wait till you see the damage we're able to do to the Godskin duo using Electrify Armament. We have the base bleed, and then on top of that, we have really high AR with the Claws. After patch 1.09, they do even more damage. If you're somebody that likes to mix things up, an option that you have too is you can also use Bloodflame Blade and run it that way too, occasionally just to throw in the bleed if you need to get past any bosses. And then you can also use, as I showed here, Electrify Armament, and then a whole bunch of different incantations because we have over 40 faith as well. This may have actually been one of my favorite recent builds that I did, simply for the fact that I'm learning to enjoy Claws even more now since the recent buffs, and on top of that, the versatility, the fact that you can invest in dexterity, which obviously speeds up your casting times and whatnot a little bit too, while also making use of the damage of the Claws and the incantations themselves by using Faith, and simply again for the fact that with Electrify Armament on, we're able to get fantastically good AR from the Claws too. This is a solid all-around build. Let's get into equipment. For equipment, we have the Raptor's Talons plus 25 preferably. Any seal will do. We have the Crucible Knight set on because this allows you to have really good poison, really good armor with this build. We have the Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Millicent's Prosthesis. We have the Lightning Scorpion Charm. We have the Dragon Crest Great Shield Talisman. And you can throw in the Lightning tier and the Thorny tier to get massive damage out of this build. Definitely a build that you're going to want to try out. It has a lot of versatility. Let's get into stats for this one. And for this one, as I mentioned, it has a lot of versatility in terms of how many different incantations you can use with this. There's a lot of versatility in that sense. And then on top of that, you're able to stack a whole bunch of damage with the Claws too. Electrify Armament is fantastic on there as well. And you can also use Bloodflame Blade, again, to go for that bleed build that can absolutely shred the majority of bosses too. This is a solid setup and one you definitely should try. And after the stats here, we're going to go on to number 3. And the third one on here was another one I did this week, and that's Malekith's Black Blade build. We did a whole combination build here. This one was an absolute blast to use, and it consists of using the Black Blade itself, the weapon, Malekith's Black Blade, along with the Black Blade incantation, and then throwing in the Black Knife for some distance attacks as well. This is one, again, you're really going to enjoy if you try, especially since you're able to get so much percentage damage out of this. And by the way, the Black Knife and Black Blade incantation stack, as well as the Black Blade, Malekith's Black Blade and the Black Blade incantation. Not all three of them don't stack, but the percentage damage on those two, either weapon and then the incantation, will stack for a lot of damage. You really make use of that percentage damage, take advantage of the debuff you get too. This one does substantial damage. Let's get into equipment. For equipment, we have Malekith's Black Blade plus 10. We have the Black Knife plus 10. We have the Erdtree Seal because it scales fantastically with Faith. We have Malekith's armor set on, Shard of Alexander, Sacred Scorpion Charm, Ritual Swords Talisman, Dragon Crest, preferably the Great Shield. And then you can throw in something like the Holy Tier and the Faith Tier as well. Let's get into stats. Now for Malekith's Black Blade, the Ash of War itself scales primarily with your Strength and your Faith stats, so you're going to want to split between those two and get those as high as possible to take advantage of that. As long as you have 12 decks, use the Black Knife too. Ash of War on that scales primarily with Faith. These all combine and go well together. And you need 46 Faith, by the way. I was one short. I used the Faith Tier if you want to use the Black Blade incantation too. Everything mixes really well in this build. This is a well-rounded, powerful Faith Strength build, so that's definitely something you got to try out. And this one I just did, and this was the Necromancer build number 4, and this one was really fun too because death sorceries can be a lot of fun, and I got to use summons for this one too. Yeah, this was something as far as the death sorceries go that I didn't use too often, so it's really interesting being able to throw them out here. But playing as a Necromancer, using the Skeleton Militiamen, and then using stuff like Ancient Death Rancor. Rykard's Rancor isn't a death sorcery, but it does fit the whole theme. The spells themselves and everything came together for a really fun build that ended up, again, just being really enjoyable and something that I didn't want to put down and I wanted to keep using. Death sorceries, something a little bit interesting and different, especially since it's Faith and Intelligence. I know we don't use that as much because there's not enough Faith and Intelligence stuff in the game, in my opinion. Hopefully DLC will change that. Sword of Night and Flame is probably the best out of all of it, at least in my opinion. Overall, though, this does amount to a fun and powerful build. If you buff it and utilize it correctly, you can definitely make use of it. And you can have a blast while you're doing it. It's a really, really good one. Let's get into equipment. For equipment, we have the Prince of Death's Staff, we have the Sword of Night and Flame and Death Ritual Spear. We were using those as our weapons, the Jellyfish Shield, and then we have any seal will do there as far as the seal goes. As far as the Spellblade set, it will boost the Ashes of War, the Beam on the Sword of Night and Flame, and the Death Ritual Spear, Shard of Alexander, Graven Mask Talisman, Ritual Swords Talisman, Magic Scorpion Charm, Skeleton Militiamen, and then the Magic Tier, and then the Faith Tier as well. Let's get into stats. So for stats here, this is definitely a lot easier to do at level 200 than it is 150 because we are going for Faith and Intelligence. Generally speaking, if you're using the Prince of Death staff though, you're going to want 45 on each as far as Faith and Intelligence, but you're going to want to lean a little bit more towards Intelligence so you can do a little bit better as far as the sorceries and stuff go. As far as the weapons themselves, you'll get good damage out of them with 45 and 45. Overall, it is doable at 150, but much easier at 200. And next up is the Banished Blood Knight. I did this one not too long ago, and this was a double slash Banished Knight build. Basically, we used everything that the Banished Knight has, and then we threw on double slash, and we obviously gave it bleed affinity, and we're able to do a substantial amount of damage. It is a little bit slower than some of the other better double slash options, but as far as the weapon itself and setup goes, the whole Banished Blood Knight theme was something that I really liked doing. It ended up turning out really well. It was really cool to do. And plus, even though I missed there, we ended up shredding Morgott on New Game Plus 7. Not that he has a ton of HP or anything, and obviously he does take good damage from bleed and whatnot, but even so, this is something you can use for the majority of the game, and you can end up with good defense and poise too with the set itself. The Banished Blood Knight ended up turning out to a really unique and fun build. Let's get into equipment. For equipment, we have the Banished Knight's Greatsword plus 25 preferably with double slash and blood affinity on it. We have his shield, his entire set on. We have the Shard of Alexander, Lord of Blood's Exaltation, Rotten Wing Sword Insignia, Dragon Crest, preferably the Great Shield Talisman, and then we have the Thorny tier along with the Faith tier so we can do some buffs as well on this build. This is a really enjoyable one. This is something that I absolutely had a blast with. let's get into stats for this one. Stats, this is very much a strength and arcane build. This is something that you're going to be able to invest in as far as strength and arcane and give you a little bit of different variety as far as that goes. And again, double slash does a lot of bleed, a lot of damage in general. There obviously are better options, but the Banished Knight setup ended up being something that I thought was really cool, and it seemed fitting too. I like the whole Banished Blood Knight theme. This is definitely one you're going to want to try, and all of these in general are ones that I really didn't want to put down. I just wanted to keep going back and playing, and I did have to move on to some other builds, but a couple of these ones I went on and I continued to play with because I just enjoyed them that much to that extent, so I figured I'd share them with you, a list of 5 of the ones that were, for me, the most fun over the past couple weeks on patch 1.09. Wanted to mention real quick, by the way, if you're not on the Discord, definitely be sure to join that. There's a ton of people on there now. There's over 400 people, so definitely be sure to join that. It's in the description below, by the way. And if you're not subbed and you love overpowered PvE builds, be sure to check out all the awesome builds that are on my channel. Thanks for watching, and as always, I will catch you guys there.